Have you ever noticed how history seems to repeat itself? Well, today, we're diving into a powerful idea from our source material, a specific historical pattern that is claimed to have brought down three major superpowers over the last 500 years. And according to this analysis, a fourth superpower might be following the exact same script right now.
So it really begs the question on this slide, are superpowers permanent? Think about it. The Spanish Empire, the British Empire, the Soviet Union, they all seemed invincible at their peak, and yet every single one of them fell. This explainer uncovers a theory that suggests a predictable roadmap for their collapse.
Okay, let's get right into it. The central claim from our source is that one historical pattern is responsible for the fall of past empires. But what's even more shocking is the argument that the United States is currently at stage 5 of this very same pattern. That's a bold claim, so let's break down what that really means.
So let's kick off with our first section, superpower collapse, a pattern. First things first, we need to understand what imperial collapse actually means in this context. It's not always the decisive battle you might see in a movie. The pattern described in the source material starts somewhere much quieter.
Here's the critical point. Imperial collapse, as is defined here, begins with economic exhaustion. Superpowers spread themselves too thin, with military bases all over the globe, fighting wars on multiple fronts, and making financial promises they can no longer keep. On the surface, everything might look fine, but underneath, the economic foundation is cracking.
Now on to Section 2, 3 lessons from history. To see this pattern in action, our source points to 3 major historical examples. These case studies are really the foundation of this entire theory. Let's see how it plays out, starting with the very first global superpower. Our first lesson comes from Spain. After 1492, it became the world's first true global empire, controlling vast territories, and most importantly, the world's biggest gold and silver mines. Spain effectively controlled Europe's money supply, and it seemed like their dominance was locked in for good. But this is where the pattern kicks in. Spain got caught in a cycle, which we can see on this slide. It started with military overextension, fighting wars on multiple continents. To pay for it, they started debasing their currency, mixing copper into their silver coins. This led to a devastating debt spiral, a loss of productive capacity at home, and eventually social decay.
And that death spiral? It became incredibly real. Get this, Spain declared bankruptcy a staggering 4 times in just 40 years. With the flood of silver, they stopped making things at home, leading to that loss of productive capacity. This economic rot eventually led to social decay, and the empire crumbled from the inside out.
All right, let's fast forward about 300 years to our second case study, the British Empire. By 1900, Britain was the undisputed global power. The saying was, the sun never sets on the British Empire, and the pound sterling was the world's reserve currency. And here we go again. The source material points to the very same pattern. The massive cost of 2 world wars represented their military overextension. That triggered a debt spiral, as they borrowed heavily from the US, turning from the world's creditor to its biggest debtor. Currency debasement followed when they abandoned the gold standard. This financial weakness made it impossible to maintain their colonies, resulting in a loss of empire and the collapse of the pound's global dominance.
And now for our third lesson from history, and maybe the most shocking example, the Soviet Union. For 45 years, it was one of 2 global superpowers, locked in a struggle with the US. Its collapse seemed unthinkable, right up until the moment it happened.
And yet the source argues that the pattern held. The military overextension, from trying to match US spending, caused economic stagnation. That was followed by a currency collapse, as the ruble became worthless. From there, it was a rapid-fire sequence, the loss of their empire in Eastern Europe, and then the complete internal collapse of the state itself.
The speed of that final stage is truly mind-blowing. As the slide shows, it took only 900 days from the moment the Berlin Wall fell, the first major crack in their own facade, to the complete dissolution of the Soviet Union. This wasn't a slow decline. It was a sudden implosion, all driven by economic failure.
So this all brings us to the main argument of the source material, applying this pattern to the US today. After examining Spain, Britain, and the USSR, the analysis claims that the United States has already passed through the first 5 stages of the same cycle. This slide really lays out the side-by-side comparison presented in the source. It draws these direct parallels. Military overextension is compared to America's vast network of global bases. Currency debasement is compared to modern monetary policy. The debt spirals of the past are compared to the current national debt, and the loss of productive capacity is compared to a reliance on imports.
Let's walk through those 5 stages the source claims are already in the rearview mirror. Stage 1, as we see at the top, is military overextension. That leads to Stage 2, currency debasement, where the source notes the drop in the dollar's purchasing power. From there, Stage 3, a debt spiral. Then Stage 4, a loss of productive capacity. And finally, the analysis places the U.S. at Stage 5, social decay, marked by deep political divisions.
This table highlights the source's argument for Stage 4. The claim is that America has shifted from a country that makes things, like electronics and steel, to one that produces finance and services. It imports critical goods, while one of its primary exports has become debt itself, in the form of treasury bonds sold to the rest of the world.
All right, let's move to the final section of this explainer, the final 2 stages. So, if the U.S. is at Stage 5, what comes next? According to this pattern, there are only 2 stages left. This is where the analysis moves from historical comparison to a projection about the future.
The last 2 steps in the 7-stage sequence are shown here. Stage 6 is the loss of the US dollar status as the world's reserve currency. That, the source argues, will trigger the final domino, Stage 7, a rapid collapse much like the one experienced by the Soviet Union.
The source points to several current events as potential warning signs of Stage 6. As shown here, the BRICS bloc is exploring alternatives to the dollar. Countries like China and Russia are trading oil in their own currencies. Saudi Arabia is settling trades in currencies like the yuan, and central banks around the world are buying physical gold. According to the analysis, these aren't isolated incidents, but part of a bigger shift.
This brings us to the final conclusion from the source, summed up perfectly by the quote on this slide. The argument is that every fallen empire believed it was the exception to the rule. But the theory holds that this pattern isn't about culture or politics. It's the mathematical result of spending more than you produce.
So, we're left with the powerful and, well, pretty unsettling question posed on this final slide. If the historical pattern is as clear as the source suggests, and the parallels to the present are this direct, is the ending also inevitable? That's the provocative thought this analysis leaves us with.